Serena thought she had escaped the darkness. For 3 years, she lived on the quiet edge of the world, trading diamonds and power for silence and fear, knowing her daughter, Maya, was the secret heir to the Yakuza's dragon, Ryker Tanaka. She hid the baby from the MAFIA boss, but she never understood the depth of his devotion. Tonight, the silence is broken. He has finally found them, bringing with him the danger she always feared, but also a love so absolute, it is more terrifying than any threat. Serena understood that certain love affairs were not constellations of joy, but gravitational forces designed to crush. To be entwined with Ryker Tanaka, the head of the immense Tanaka syndicate, a man whose power was measured in the silence of rooms he entered, and the impossible reach of his influence was to stand on the edge of a volcano. She had tasted the sublime fire of his attention, the possessive warmth of his embrace, and the chilling cold reality of his life. That reality was why she had been meticulously, brutally efficient in her disappearance 3 years ago, trading Tokyo's blinding electric energy for the damp, green quiet of a remote, unincorporated parcel of land outside Port Angeles, Washington. Her cottage was intentionally shabby, hidden beneath the colossal, indifferent canopy of ancient cedars. The only currency here was patience and quiet maintenance. Here, the pervasive scent was cedar pitch and misty rain, not the oppressive blend of leather, custom cologne, and the faint, indelible trace of gun oil that defined Ryker's world. Her existence was now defined by small, deliberate choices. A low-paying, untraceable job at a local co-op, cash payments for everything, and the fierce, unyielding devotion to her 3-year-old daughter, Maya. Maya was the most exquisite, dangerous secret Serena possessed. The child was an extraordinary blend. Serena's rich, luminous skin and the vibrant, expressive nature of her black heritage, combined with the sharp, deep-seated intensity of her Japanese father. Maya's eyes were the most striking feature, exact copies of Ryker's own, obsidian, unwavering, and framed by thick, dark lashes that gave her an unsettlingly adult gaze. "Mama, look, a fairy house," Maya giggled, pointing to a knot in the root system of a massive Douglas fir. She was wearing mismatched pink and orange rain boots, an absurdity that always made Serena smile. A rare, genuine curve of the lips. Serena knelt, the wet earth soaking into her jeans. Her hand instinctively tightened around Maya's small wrist. The vigilance never ever ceased. "That's a very safe house for a very strong fairy," she said softly, breathing in the scent of her daughter's hair, a scent that grounded her and reminded her why she was a fugitive. Protect the innocent thing. This was the sacred duty that powered her isolation. She had seen firsthand the wreckage Ryker's enemies left behind. In his game, heirs were targets, and love was the vulnerability exploited first. Ryker, with his fierce code of honor and deep-seated pride, would never have allowed their child to be hidden. He would have simply brought the war to them, surrounding them with a fortress that would feel more like a cage to Serena. She had chosen to give Maya a wild, free existence rather than a gilded, monitored one. The escape had cost her everything, including her connection to her family, all severed to protect them from the fallout. She had left Ryker only one message, hidden in a book of classical poetry he never read. A simple note saying she had gone to find a life where every sunrise wasn't a gamble. She had offered him no details, and crucially no hint that she was carrying his child. She knew the weight of his reaction to a simple abandonment. She couldn't imagine the terror of his response to discovering an heir. Thousands of miles away, in the stark, magnificent headquarters of the Tanaka Syndicate, a brutal, elegant blend of ancient tradition and modern control, Ryker Tanaka lived in a persistent state of cold fury. The empire ran flawlessly, a testament to his sheer competence. But his emotional landscape was a frozen wasteland, haunted by the memory of Serena. Her disappearance 3 years prior was not merely a loss. It was a cosmic imbalance. Ryker, who controlled markets and ministers who dictated the terms of life and death, could not locate one woman who had slipped through his fingers like smoke. It was an insult to his prestige, a mockery of his power, and a visceral agony he could not articulate. His search had been relentless, exhaustive, and ultimately humiliatingly fruitless. His most skilled analysts had scoured every digital and physical trail. Kenji, his loyal lieutenant, stood before him in the towering penthouse office, concerned about the relentless drain on resources. "Ryker-sama," Kenji said, his voice low and respectful. "The Manila operations are suffering from the attention we are diverting to this personal matter. We must address the Triad's encroachments." Ryker looked out over the infinite glittering sprawl of Tokyo. He was dressed in a dark custom-made suit, his posture impeccable, but his eyes were the only thing that betrayed the man inside. Burning, desolate, searching. "The Triads are an irritation, Kenji. They will wait. Serena is a cancer that consumes my focus. Find the root and the empire stabilizes." He hadn't been reviewing intelligence reports. He had been reviewing old records, financial ledgers from 5 years ago, specifically a property deal he had backed for Serena's mother, years before they were romantically involved. He was following a thread of pure memory, a scrap of emotion he hadn't thought he'd shared. He remembered Serena joking about escaping to a place called the Quiet Coast, where no one would ask about high heels or haute couture. It was irrational, sentimental, but Ryker was desperate. He ordered an advanced linguistic scan on all communication intercepts and property deeds worldwide, looking for that phrase, Quiet Coast. The search finally, after 3 years of silence, yielded a faint whisper of truth. An old, dusty land survey in Washington state referencing a small utility hookup request for a resident who had listed her current address as the Quiet Coast Cottage. The applicant's name was a generic alias, but the purchase documents for the land, a small cash-only transfer, had been handled by an associate of one of Ryker's long-retired trusted money managers. The breadcrumb was microscopic, but it was there. He cross-referenced the property's geographical location with 3 years of private satellite imaging data. He didn't find the woman who called herself Elizabeth. He found Serena. And he found evidence of a second smaller figure constantly within the frame. A child. Ryker felt the world tilt. The cold fury vanished, replaced by a seismic shift of recognition. He stared at the image. A woman with a magnificent riot of dark curls, chasing a small figure with startlingly dark hair. "Prepare the flight immediately," Ryker commanded, his voice shaking with restrained force. "Send the jet to Payne Field. Take 3 men. No guns, no unnecessary displays of power. I will not approach her in force. Not yet." Kenji, terrified by the suppressed emotion in his leader's eyes, simply nodded. "And inform my mother," Ryker added, his voice low, "that her grandson or granddaughter has been located." It was late afternoon in Port Angeles. Serena was standing by the stove, stirring a thick stew, the comforting aroma of rosemary and beef filling the small kitchen. Maya was supposed to be napping, but the sudden aggressive shift in the weather, a fierce blustering wind that howled off the water, had made her restless. Serena was humming softly, the noise of the wind strangely soothing when her internal alarm system screamed. The hairs on the back of her neck prickled. The humming stopped. She saw them first. The black, impossibly clean SUV parked just beyond the tree line. its presence a jarring affront to the wilderness. Then the men, three massive disciplined figures, who moved with the silent, practiced grace of men whose lives were spent anticipating violence. And finally, Ryker Tanaka. He stepped out of the shadow of the cedars. He hadn't bothered to wear a hat or adjust his expensive, perfectly tailored trench coat, which was already damp with rain. He looked like an impossible sculpture carved from marble and shadow, too elegant, too dangerous to exist in this rustic, simple clearing. He was a creature of urban legend, now real and standing on her worn, muddy path. Serena's body reacted before her mind did. She scrambled silently toward the hall closet, which held her emergency rucksack and the old hunting rifle. Run now. She knew the geography of this forest better than any man he could hire. But Maya, startled by the kitchen door swinging open, and Serena's abrupt movement, chose that moment to wake up and wander out of her bedroom. "Mama, what's wrong? Why are you hiding?" Maya's small voice was innocent, confused, and devastatingly loud in the sudden charged silence. Ryker, who had just stepped onto the wooden porch, stopped. He had been focused on the woman he lost, the woman who had stolen his peace. But then the high, clear voice of the child arrested him. His gaze dropped from Serena, locked in the doorway, to the little girl standing by the table, clutching a small, bright red dinosaur toy. In the dim light of the cabin, the truth hit him with the force of a wrecking ball. The shape of the brow, the decisive curve of the chin, the sheer weight of intelligence in those eyes, they were him. They were the continuation of the Tanaka line, a continuation he had been told was impossible. Ryker stood utterly still, his breathing shallow. He felt the immense, terrifying power he wielded drain away, leaving him just a man, a father, seeing his lost creation for the first time. All the years of searching, the fury, the resentment over her betrayal evaporated under the sheer, brutal beauty of the child. He spoke her name, a fractured sound torn from a throat that rarely showed emotion. Maya. Maya peered up at the tall man, noting his intense focus and his expensive, dangerous stillness. She took one curious step closer. "You're very wet," Maya observed, tilting her head and pointing to the raindrops beating on his coat. She thought for a long moment, then repeated the question that seemed most important to her at that moment. "Are you the king of the rain?" Serena watched the devastating realization flash across Ryker's face. The recognition, the possessiveness, the love. She knew that the quiet sanctuary she had fought for was gone forever. The battle for Maya's soul and her own had just begun. The storm outside the cottage raged, a fitting soundtrack for the cataclysm that had just erupted in Serena's kitchen. Yet inside, a stillness colder than the Pacific wind had descended. Maya's innocent question, "Are you the king of the rain?" hung in the air, a tiny fragile pin holding two worlds apart. Ryker Tanaka did not move. He was a man accustomed to having words, contracts, and power at his absolute disposal. But the sight of his daughter had rendered him utterly mute. His obsidian eyes, usually pools of calculated judgment, were fixed on Maya's small face, tracing the perfect, infuriating lineage back to himself. The realization was physically staggering. He felt the solid earth beneath his feet dissolving. Serena, however, was galvanized by pure primal terror. The shock wore off, replaced by the burning certainty that her protective custody of Maya was over. "Get out," Serena said, her voice a low, furious hiss that sliced through the quiet. She took two deliberate steps, placing her body squarely between Ryker and Maya. You have no right to be here. Ryker finally blinked, his gaze snapping to Serena. The expression he wore was not the cold disdain of the syndicate boss, but a raw, agonizing sorrow that nearly buckled her knees. 3 years, he whispered, the sound thick with disbelief and accusation. 3 years, Serena. You let me believe you simply abandoned me. You were carrying this, our daughter. Maya, sensing the seismic anger in her mother, wrapped her arms around Serena's leg. Mama? Is he a bad guy? Serena looked down at Maya, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. No, honey. He's just lost. Go back to your room now. Okay. Mommy has to send him on his way. Maya hesitated, looking from her mother's strained face to the imposing man in the doorway. Ryker watched the interaction, the simple, effortless connection between mother and child, and the pain deepened. He was an outsider, a terrifying figure in a storm, relegated to the role of a stranger by the woman he had loved and who had clearly never stopped loving her child. I won't leave, Ryker stated, his voice regaining a fraction of its accustomed authority. Though it was still shaky, he stepped fully into the kitchen, the scent of expensive wool and cold rain instantly dominating the cozy space. You hid her, Serena. You stole my daughter, my heir, and condemned her to this rustic life, when she deserves everything my name can provide. And what is your name, Ryker? Serena shot back, her hands balled into fists, ready to physically fight if necessary. It is a weapon. It's a target painted on the backs of everyone you care about. I didn't steal her. I saved her. Saved her from a life where every friendship is a political move and every birthday party is a security threat. She took a breath, tears of pure rage starting to sting her eyes. I loved you truly, but I saw the bodies, Ryker. I saw the aftermath. I knew that love for you meant a death sentence for her. I chose life, Ryker. I chose a quiet, safe life over your monstrous, beautiful throne. Ryker flinched as if struck. The word monstrous settled over him, the ultimate condemnation. He hadn't thought of himself as a monster when he was with her. He had thought of himself as a protector. I would have protected you both, he insisted, his voice hardening, desperation starting to blend with his old controlling instinct. I would have built an army around you. No one touches the family of Ryker Tanaka. Exactly, Serena cried, gesturing wildly around the small, simple kitchen. That's the cage. Maya deserves to run in the woods, not the private guarded gardens of Tokyo. She deserves to be a child, not a political bargaining chip. Do you think I don't know what your rivals would do to leverage a child against you? Do you think I didn't hear the whispers about the Tanaka heir? I will not let her become collateral damage in your endless petty wars. Ryker walked slowly toward the small, scarred wooden table, his movements heavy and deliberate. He stopped, not close enough to threaten, but close enough for the sheer magnetic force of his presence to be overwhelming. You misunderstand the nature of my love, Ryker said, his voice dropping to the low, dangerous pitch that used to send shivers of excitement through her, and now only inspired dread. You think love is softness, flight, and surrender. For me, love is absolute responsibility. It is eliminating every single threat, large or small, real or perceived. It is ownership and protection, forged into one unbreakable shield. He looked at Maya's closed bedroom door, and his face was etched with an agonizing mixture of pride and regret. You made me search for 3 years. You put yourself and my daughter at risk of discovery by anyone just to hurt me with your absence. Did you truly believe I would stop looking? Do you not know the kind of man I am? That is precisely why I left, Serena spat out, her voice cracking with the emotional weight of her past decision. Because I know the kind of man you are. You are a king, Ryker, and kings do not make good fathers. They make good rulers. I don't want a ruler. I want a father who can walk Maya to school without bodyguards screening the kindergarten class. She swallowed hard, trying to regain control. Your men are outside. You found me. Fine. Look your fill. But I will not let you take her. I am her mother. I am her only parent. You sign papers. You leave this place. And you go back to your throne, Ryker. You don't ruin her life with your darkness. Ryker shook his head slowly, a grim, humorless expression settling on his features. That is where your fear blinds you, Serena. You think you have the power of negotiation. You do not. You were found. You are under my purview now. I respect the integrity of your choice, but I will not for one single moment allow my daughter to live without my protection, nor will I be excluded from her life. He looked toward the porch where the heavy rain was turning the afternoon dark. The storm is heavy. The road is slick. My men are securing the perimeter because in your haste to hide from me, you left yourself vulnerable to everyone else. Any common criminal could have stumbled upon you. I will not allow it. He then made the declaration that sealed her fate, not with a threat of violence, but with the non-negotiable weight of his wealth and authority. We are not leaving, Serena. I am not taking Maya from you, but I am moving in for now. Until I can ensure this entire region is sanitized and secured to my standards, I will stay here. You will not fight me on this, because every moment you spend arguing is a moment you are not teaching Maya about the world. Serena stared at him, her body rigid with shock. You can't. You can't just move in. I can, Ryker said, his gaze hard and uncompromising. I own the property the cottage is built on. I own the clearing. I own the title to this land, a fact which you conveniently ignored in your frantic escape. I merely allowed you to live here undisturbed as a courtesy to my lost love. Now that courtesy is rescinded. It was a lie, a brutal, efficient fabrication, meant to assert dominance and cut off her escape. He didn't own the land, he'd just traced the original corporate owner and made them disappear, taking ownership only moments before landing, but the effect was immediate. Serena's shoulders slumped slightly, realizing the sheer impossibility of fighting his network. Her careful independence was built on a foundation of sand, and he had just brought the tide in. Ryker took advantage of the hesitation. He reached into his coat and produced a small leather-bound folder. He placed it carefully on the table. This folder contains the credentials for a new bank account, Serena. It is a substantial sum, fully legal and clean, generated from my legitimate holdings. It is for Maya's education and yours. It is my first payment for the 3 years of her life I missed. I will continue to pay every day by being here. He walked past her, his coat brushing her shoulder, the smallest, most devastating touch. He moved with a practiced confidence into the small living room, dropping his coat and stepping out of his perfectly polished shoes, as if he were simply returning home from a long, arduous day. I will not sleep in your bed, Serena. I will take the couch. I do not need the rifle you have hidden in the closet. My presence is sufficient protection. Now call my men inside. They are freezing, and they need to set up the encrypted satellite communication. Serena watched him, her lungs seizing up, her world narrowing to the sight of this king of the underworld, this monster she loved and feared, making himself at home in her sanctuary. He was a perfect, terrifying blend of the man she ran from and the father she realized Maya deserved, a man who would never tolerate weakness in his family. He turned back to her, and in his eyes there was a flash of something she hadn't seen since the beginning of their affair. pure, unbridled triumph. "The running ends here, Serena. You asked me to leave. I choose to stay for Maya and perhaps for the life you tried to build without me." The storm wailed outside, echoing the chaos in Serena's soul. He had not taken Maya by force. He had simply caged them both with his inescapable love. She knew then that escaping the Yakuza boss was impossible. Now her only option was to fight the father. The storm eventually subsided, leaving behind a world sparkling with wet moss and dripping cedar. But inside the little cottage, the atmosphere remained heavy and charged, thick with unspoken hostility and the crushing weight of Ryker Tanaka's uninvited presence. For Serena, the days that followed felt less like a life and more like an extremely polite, highly volatile hostage situation. Ryker had settled into the role of the unwanted houseguest with the terrifying ease of a conqueror. Laying claim to new territory, he immediately requisitioned the small dining table as his makeshift command center, covered with imported espresso cups and a heavily encrypted satellite tablet that never left his side. His bodyguards, impeccably dressed and silent as ghosts, rotated shifts in the perimeter of the dense woods, their presence invisible to the neighbors, but profoundly felt by Serena. He had not raised his voice or made a single explicitly physical demand. His control was purely psychological, asserted through the sheer unwavering force of his will and his resources. "The heat exchanger in the chimney is inefficient," Ryker announced on the second morning, looking up from his tablet. "Kenji is arranging for a full inspection and repair team. They will be disguised as local contractors. I expect them to be finished before Maya's nap." Serena, who was slicing apples for Maya, slammed the knife down. "I don't need your full inspection, Ryker. I don't want your money or your repairs. I want the anonymity I earned, and you risked it," Ryker countered, his gaze cool and even. "The structural integrity of this home is questionable. If you insist on residing in a shack, I insist that the shack be fortified. This is not about comfort, Serena. This is about operational security." He had reduced her cozy self-made life to a security flaw, and her quiet dignity to a foolish risk. The irony, however, was that Ryker was fundamentally ill-equipped for this domestic intrusion. He was a master of finance, strategy, and combat. But the small, complex duties of fatherhood defeated him utterly. One afternoon, Serena watched, rigid with scorn, as Ryker attempted to engage Maya in a game of blocks. He tried to build a structure that was architecturally perfect and structurally sound, but Maya only wanted to knock it down and giggle. "Maya," Ryker said, his tone utterly devoid of playfulness, "you must understand that the load-bearing capacity of the central column is compromised by your use of the circular piece. If you continue with this methodology, the structure will fail." Maya just frowned at him, unimpressed. "Papa is boring." The designation Papa sent a ripple of excruciating tenderness through Serena's heart. Maya, blessedly unburdened by history, had simply adopted the stranger as a father figure, instinctively recognizing a truth Serena had fled. Ryker looked utterly defeated. He looked at Serena, a rare plea for help shining in his dark eyes. Serena walked over and knelt beside Maya. "Maya, Papa's very good at building strong castles, but maybe we need to build a silly wobbly tower first. See?" She stacked 3 blocks precariously. Maya immediately swatted it down with a shriek of delight. Ryker watched, completely mesmerized. He saw the effortless communication, the maternal instinct that knew exactly how to bridge the gap between structure and chaos. He picked up a circular block, a flicker of something new, amusement touching his lips. He placed the block on his own head. Maya erupted into laughter, rushing forward to place a second block on Ryker's head. For the first time, Serena saw the syndicate boss disappear, replaced by a man who looked vulnerable, slightly foolish, and unequivocally happy. Later that evening, the moment of soft vulnerability was shattered by a flash of old dread. Maya had just drifted off, and Serena was checking on her when Ryker appeared in the doorway, his features once again carved from stone. "Your security is abysmal," he muttered, not as an insult, but as a diagnosis. "I installed a thermal camera array tonight. It picked up a vehicle. It was not a local registration, nor was it a vehicle type common in this county. It was a mid-range sedan, slow, circling the logging road." Serena felt the familiar chill of fear creep up her spine. This wasn't local curiosity. This was surveillance. A private investigator. Ryker shook his head, moving to his command table. He pulled up a map of the region, highlighted with his new camera. "Feeds. My security net is fine, but it is regional. Someone noticed the unusual flight activity and the sudden, unscheduled arrival of a major figure. They are probing Serena. They are confirming who is here and why." He looked at her, and the intensity of his gaze demanded the truth. "You told me you were protecting Maya from my world. Tell me truthfully, did you ever suspect you were being followed or watched before I arrived?" Serena hesitated, remembering the brief, irrational moment a year ago when she thought she saw the same black sedan twice in 1 week. She had dismissed it as paranoia. "I was always careful," she admitted, her voice hollow. "But no, I was never certain." "I am," Ryker said with grim finality. "This is not a local crime. This is a subtle attempt at reconnaissance by people who understand the calculus of leverage. My rivals have noticed the Tanaka dragon has left his lair. They think they have found my weakness." The thought was terrifying, but what was more terrifying was the realization that Ryker was once again the only person on Earth who truly understood the danger. Her safe little shack was exposed. The next afternoon, the situation escalated from theoretical concern to tangible threat. Serena had taken Maya out to collect seashells on the foggy, secluded beach, a ritual she loved. Ryker insisted on a low-profile detail. One of his men, a quiet giant named Akira, walking 50 yards behind them, blending expertly into the gloom. When they returned to the cottage, the air tasted wrong. A small thing, almost imperceptible. The power was out. Serena's first instinct was the local utility. "It must be the storm damage," she said, her voice strained. Ryker's eyes narrowed. He looked at Akira, who was already scanning the tree line. "The utility company was notified of our presence. They were instructed to contact my office before any unscheduled maintenance. Akira, check the service line." Akira returned moments later, his face grim. "Ryker-sama, the external line was cut clean. Not with weather. It was a deliberate professional severance." Serena's breath hitched. She pulled Maya close. The fear she had felt when Ryker arrived was a nervous tremor compared to the cold, paralyzing terror of realizing the outside world had found them. The monster she fled was no longer the greatest threat. He was the only shield. Ryker stepped toward her, and for the first time since he arrived, she didn't flinch away. "They are testing the water, Serena. They want to see if this location is guarded, or if it is merely a love nest I fled to. They won't use bullets yet. They will use fear and disruption," Ryker explained, his voice low and intense. He reached out and gently, almost reverently, touched the side of Maya's face. The contact was so unexpected, so tender that Serena nearly wept. "This ends now," Ryker vowed, his voice a promise and a threat rolled into one. "I will not allow them to disrupt her naps or frighten you or make my daughter question the safety of her home. They want to know what I protect. I will show them. But you must trust me. You must stop fighting my methods and let me protect her, as only I can." Serena looked at the clean cut on the power line, a violation of her haven. She looked at Maya, blissfully unaware, drawing lines in the mud with a stick. Then she looked at Ryker, standing massive and resolute between her family and the hostile world. His eyes were not cold, but fiercely focused, alight with the only kind of love he knew how to offer: absolute, uncompromising defense. Her fight against the father had to end. The safety of the child demanded alliance with the boss. "What do you need me to do?" Serena whispered. The question, a heavy capitulation. A chilling, predatory smile touched Ryker's lips. The smile of the dragon who was about to defend his horde. "You need to act like my wife, Serena. You need to show them that my family is unified, and therefore untouchable." The shift in the dynamics between Serena and Ryker Tanaka was a delicate, dangerous dance. Serena, having capitulated to the necessity of his presence, now played the role of the partner, the devoted, if frosty matriarch, of the Tanaka family unit. This public display of unity was Ryker's primary defense. When local utility workers, really his security specialists, came to fix the cut wire, Serena stood beside Ryker, her hand resting on his arm, presenting a face of unshakable domesticity to the distant watching threats. In private, the tension was a physical force. Ryker was a man of routines and rigid order. Serena was a creature of spontaneity and comfort. Yet through Maya, they found an uneasy truce. Ryker never stopped observing his daughter. He learned her bedtime stories, the specific way she held her cup, and the timing of her midday tantrums. He began delegating major syndicate calls, billion-dollar negotiations to his lieutenants, simply because Maya insisted he help her color a picture of a very strong purple dragon. Serena watched these moments, her heart in a constant state of agonizing conflict. The man who sat on the floor patiently explaining to his daughter why a dragon's wings must be structurally capable of flight was the father. The man who barked low-coded commands into a secured burner phone while Maya slept was the Yakuza boss, and the two men were inseparable. "They are using a mid-level group, a faction of the Sun Yi-On Triad," Ryker explained late one evening, tracing lines on his encrypted map. "They are small, but opportunistic. They didn't come for me. They came for the leverage you represent. When they realized the prize was a child, they saw an inheritance and a massive political tool." "What are they waiting for?" Serena whispered, clutching a mug of tea. She had not slept properly since the power was cut. Ryker looked at her, his expression grim. "They are waiting for my move. They expect me to withdraw and strike them on their home turf. They think that while I am gone, they can snatch Maya, ensuring the collapse of my organization and allowing them to expand into my maritime roots. They are going to try to take her," Serena stated, the air leaving her lungs. "They already have," Ryker corrected, the chilling admission hanging in the air. That night, the power was cut. Two of them breached the outer perimeter near the stream. Akira neutralized them before they were within sight of the house. I had them contained, questioned, and removed. They confirmed the objective: secure the Tanaka heir. Serena finally broke, dropping her mug, which shattered silently on the rug. Her hands flew to her mouth, stifling a terrified sob. She had been sleeping blissfully unaware while men armed with criminal intent were yards from her child's window. Her flight had not saved Maya. It had only made her an easier target. "You should have told me," I told you when you needed to know, Ryker said, his voice flat. Fear is an unacceptable distraction when you need focus. They were testing our defenses. Now they will try again, but with greater commitment. The true escalation came 2 days later. Serena was preparing Maya's lunch when she found a small, meticulously folded origami crane placed carefully on Maya's high chair. It wasn't paper. It was folded from a brittle brown piece of dried cedar bark. Inside the folded bark, written in precise, elegant Japanese calligraphy, was a single message. The little crane flies high. A bird without a nest is easily caught. Soon the dragon's egg will hatch under our sun. Serena's blood ran cold. This wasn't a warning. It was a psychological operation designed to terrorize. They had been inside the house. Ryker materialized instantly. Called by Serena's silent, shaking presence, he picked up the tiny, grotesque message, his knuckles white. His face was unreadable, but the veins pulsing visibly in his neck betrayed the violent storm brewing beneath his calm facade. Akira, Ryker snapped into his wrist communicator. Full lockdown, nobody in, nobody out. Serena, take Maya to the basement safe room now. Serena, powered by pure adrenaline, obeyed instantly. As she hurried Maya downstairs, she realized that Ryker wasn't afraid. He was beyond fear. He was enraged. The cold, focused, unstoppable rage of a hunter who has found the scent of his prey. Once Maya was safely distracted with toys in the secure, pre-prepared room, Serena returned upstairs. She found Ryker on the communication table, not barking orders, but speaking in a chillingly measured tone. They have crossed the line, Ryker stated, looking at Serena. They touched my daughter's belongings. They violated our sacred space. The time for diplomacy, for observation, for passive defense is over. Now only absolute reckoning remains. He pulled up a complex schematic on his screen, a detailed map of the Triad faction's legitimate businesses and known safe houses across Seattle and Vancouver. He had been planning this for weeks, waiting for the necessary justification. They want leverage. I will show them what happens when you attempt to take leverage from the Tanaka Syndicate, Ryker said, his voice lowering to a barely audible growl. I will not just remove the threat. I will erase the memory of their existence, their leadership, their assets. Their entire infrastructure will cease to function by dawn. This will be an act of absolute definitive violence, Serena. He looked at her, waiting for the inevitable protest, the horror, the flight response he expected. Serena stood perfectly still. The terrified mother inside her wept. But the woman who had watched her daughter almost become a pawn in a criminal game made a choice. She had to accept that Ryker's darkness was the only thing powerful enough to protect her light. I only have one condition, Serena said, her voice shaking but firm. I don't want to know the names. I don't want to know the method. I only want the assurance that when the sun rises, they are gone forever, and that Maya will never ever be endangered again. Ryker looked at her, his eyes softening slightly, not with compassion, but with a fierce, possessive admiration for her strength. This was the partnership he craved, a shared commitment to the family's survival, no matter the cost. Done, he confirmed, a flicker of that terrifying, predatory smile returning. I execute the plan tonight. I will be back before sunrise, and when I return, this region will be the safest place on the North American continent. What happened over the next few hours was not seen, but felt. Serena spent the time in Maya's room, reading Goodnight Moon, and listening to the high-pitched metallic whisper of Ryker giving his final orders over the secured channel. She heard the silent departure of vehicles, the sharp, concise commands in Japanese that sounded less like human language and more like the mechanism of a well-oiled machine of destruction. She knew Ryker was not just sending men. Ryker was the Tanaka Syndicate. He was the cold intellect and the ruthless hand that would ensure the operation was flawless, leaving no loose ends, no chance for retaliation. He returned just as the first gray light of dawn was filtering through the dense woods. He was alone. He was still wearing the same tailored suit, but it was slightly rumpled, his hair damp, and there was a faint metallic scent clinging to the expensive wool that made Serena's stomach turn. He walked past her, silent, heading straight for the bathroom. Serena heard the shower running for a long time, a methodical ritual of cleansing the dirt of his empire. When he emerged, he was freshly dressed, impeccably composed, and looked utterly exhausted, but relieved. He walked over to the safe room door, opened it, and watched Maya drawing her purple dragon. Serena finally spoke, her voice barely a breath. "Is it done?" Ryker met her gaze. He didn't offer details, just a cold, absolute assurance. "The Sunyi faction that targeted us is no longer operational, Serena. Their businesses are in receivership. Their leaders have vanished. Their message has been received by every organization in the Pacific Rim. Maya is untouchable. You are untouchable. My love for my family is absolute, and I will burn entire cities to keep you safe." He sat down heavily on the couch, the morning sun finally hitting his face, revealing the depth of his fatigue. He looked at her no longer as a boss or a monster, but as a man who had just risked everything and done the unforgivable to secure his future. "You hate what I did," he said, stating a fact. "But your daughter is safe. That is the only thing that matters. Now you must decide if you can live in the shadow of the man who keeps her safe." Serena walked over to the couch, drawn by a force she could no longer deny. She had fled the darkness only to realize that the most powerful darkness belonged to the man who was now her protector. She did not touch him, but she stood near enough to feel the warmth radiating off him, the silent promise of enduring safety. She had fought the boss and fought the father. Now she simply accepted the guardian. Her hand finally reached out, not in surrender, but in alliance, tracing the faint stubble along his jaw. "Tell me about the purple dragon," she said softly. A simple human invitation back from the void. The profound silence that followed Ryker Tanaka's decisive action was heavier than any storm. It wasn't a silence of peace, but the heavy secured stillness of a vacuum. The absolute calm that comes after a powerful force has swept through and ensured that no threat remains. The frantic 3-year-long flight of Serena was over, replaced by a permanent certainty. She stood in the cottage, watching the sun rise over the damp Pacific forests, and knew her only future lay with the man who had traded temporary peace for absolute security. Ryker returned not as a victor, but as a man bearing the immense weight of the decisions he had made. He was exhausted, but his eyes were clear, focused entirely on the small world he had just fiercely protected. Their new dynamic was immediate and strange. The global crime boss and the protective mother living a meticulous domestic routine. Ryker would stand at the kitchen counter, meticulously assembling a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for Maya one minute, only to transition instantly to an encrypted tablet, giving an order that would reroute billions of dollars across the sea the next. He never asked for forgiveness. He simply demonstrated his purpose. Serena's observation shifted from fear to a grudging, then fascinated acknowledgement of his commitment. He integrated himself into Maya's life, with the same fierce meticulousness he applied to his empire. He learned the exact height of Maya's favorite stuffed dragon, the rhythm of her goodnight story, and the best way to soothe her imaginary fears. He was learning to be a father, not in spite of his power, but by applying that same absolute focus to the task. Weeks turned into a quiet, structured month, during which Ryker's presence became the air Serena breathed, unavoidable and necessary. His work was relentless, but it was all channeled toward a single revolutionary purpose: the complete reformation of his holdings. Ryker was not abandoning his empire. He was meticulously upgrading its structure. "The old way is unstable," Ryker explained to Serena one evening, sweeping aside complicated spreadsheets that detailed asset liquidation. "Violence is a liability. It draws unwarranted attention. If Maya is to inherit anything, it must be clean, fortified, and insulated by layers of legitimate investment. We shift the core income from contraband to legitimate real estate, technology ventures, and global shipping logistics. I will still be Ryker Tanaka, the most powerful man in the region, but the threat I pose will be entirely financial, not physical." Serena stared at the screen, understanding the terrifying scope of his devotion. His love for Maya wasn't a request for retirement. It was a demand for evolution. "You are doing this so she can be safe enough to choose her own life," Serena realized, the truth hitting her with sudden force. Ryker walked over and placed his large, warm hands on her shoulders, standing close enough for her to feel the heat radiating from him. "And you, Serena, you fled me once. You fled the cage. I will not build a new one. Maya must be safe enough to leave should she choose to, without fear of retaliation. My protection is not a prison. It is a shield I place around the world so that you and Maya can simply live." This was his true, unvarnished confession of love. He respected her freedom enough to spend his fortune and risk his life guaranteeing it. The definitive moment of their new beginning arrived not with a sudden kiss, but with a declaration of ownership. Ryker announced they were going on a field trip to find Maya a proper school. They drove south, away from the isolation, toward an exclusive, bustling coastal town, known for its low profile and high wealth. The large black armored SUV wound up a private tree-lined drive to a house that took Serena's breath away. It was a stunning modernist structure of glass, steel, and dark cedar built into a hillside overlooking the deep blue expanse of the Pacific Ocean. It was spacious, warm, and entirely transparent to the sunlight. Yet, Serena knew instinctively that the grounds and the house itself were an integrated technological fortress. Maya immediately ran to the panoramic windows, captivated by the crashing waves and the soaring gulls. "This is beautiful, Ryker. But we aren't looking for a house," Serena said, her voice shaking slightly. Ryker stood behind her, his presence a powerful anchor. "This is our home, Serena. It is legally owned by a holding company, managed by my legitimate counsel. The house itself is protected by 3 separate electronic countermeasures and a dedicated rotating security detail. 10 men who will remain invisible to you unless you are in danger." He then produced a small, intricately carved box of polished Japanese cedar. Inside, resting on dark silk, was not a traditional engagement ring, but a heavy platinum signet ring bearing the ornate Tanaka clan crest. A winding, powerful dragon. "I am a man of structure and permanence, Serena. I do not do things halfway," Ryker stated, his voice firm. "I searched for you for 3 years. I have reorganized my entire organization and cleansed my assets to guarantee the safety of the world you built for Maya. I have risked my entire life to secure this peace." He took her left hand, pulling her closer, until the air between them was electric with high-stakes emotion. I want you to be my wife, Serena. Not just my lover, but the official matriarch of the Tanaka family. You are the light, the guide, and the moral center that gives purpose to all this power. I will be the shield, the sword, the absolute force that ensures your light can never be extinguished. It was a terrifying, beautiful proposal, a demand for partnership, a declaration of intent, and a promise of eternal security. He was offering her the most valuable thing he possessed, the absolute focused devotion of the dragon himself. Serena felt the last walls of her resistance crumble. She had fought to save her child from the darkness, only to realize that the darkness itself, shaped by love, was her only viable protector. She accepted not out of resignation, but out of a deep, profound certainty. I accept, Serena said, her voice barely a whisper yet firm. She met his gaze. But you must promise me this. Maya will know the full truth of her father when she is ready. No more secrets about the life you lead. Ryker's eyes, usually sharp and cold, filled with a deep, consuming warmth. He slid the heavy ring onto her finger, sealing their destiny. That is my promise. She will know everything, and she will know that everything I built for her and for you. They moved into the clifftop fortress days later. Serena found a peace she never imagined possible. The peace of knowing the full extent of the danger and the full formidable power of the man who held it back. She was no longer running. She was standing at the side of her husband, the MAFIA boss, who had shown his true love by building a future so safe, so powerful, and so legitimate that nothing could ever take his family away again.